A big and warm welcome to the VEX program, where we'll be exploring some of the topical issues around the world as we begin with the fact that Russian President Putin has arrived in Vietnamese capital fresh from a rare meeting in the North Korea, which visited yesterday with the counterpart Kim Jong, in which the two leaders agreed a new strategic partnership driven by the Moscow's need for weapons for its war in Ukraine. Considered a pariah by the West, Putin is looking to boost economic ties with the friendly countries and show that Western isolation is not having an impact. The communist Vietnam appears to be a very natural choice with a foreign policy of non-alignment and close historical ties to Moscow, and few countries can successfully host the leaders of the United States, China, and Russia with such a fanfare as Vietnam. Of course, joining me to discuss on the decks today on the program is a legal practitioner, Barrister Kanemo Bassey. Is live here on the studio to add voices to the conversations of the program. Good to have you after a decade on the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Yes, thank you. I mean, let's just begin to start with the foreign interference there. Putin has been seen in North Korea, right now in Vietnam. To you, does it really shows that a man of peace, trying to picture him in the mold of the world leaders, the moment where we've seen pride taking over some other country leadership, but Putin is trying to lead by example, paying visit to get some support and to have another picture of how the world sees, Putin as a leader. To you, what does this visit really mean in the world?
Well, let's put it in clear perspective. President Vladimir Putin of Russia is only fighting for the survival of Russia. And any visit he makes to any foreign country is primarily to advance the interest of Russia before even that of those countries. Then in the arena of international diplomacy, you need to understand that leaders of nations, especially civilized and developed nations, always build bridges and enter into strong alliances and partnerships with other countries to be able to protect their interests and prepare for doomsday. For example, the war in Ukraine, Russia is prosecuting. Naturally, North Korea has been aligning with Russia, not the West, not its allies, not Europe. So it's normal for him to go on that trip. But what makes it a headline news is the fact that they have entered into a new alliance, like NATO. An attack on North Korea will be an attack on Russia. An attack on Russia will be an attack on North Korea. So it's normal. But ideally, I don't see that as a threat to the United States or its interest. They have been closely monitoring that visit. It's not new. Don't forget, at some time, former U.S. President Donald Trump paid a visit to Kim Jong-un, though not in North Korea, and even crossed the boundary between North Korea and South Korea. Historic for any leader. So it's always in the advancement of interest, and particularly in this case, military interest. But I don't see that as a threat in any form to the United States. At whatever point it becomes a threat to the United States, I'm very sure there will be a response. On the other hand, visiting Vietnam too. Vietnam is a communist state. Remember Russia before now, the Soviet Union was communist. So it's natural. They welcome that kind of leader. But for the sake of democracy, I'd like us to see the underlying issues of oppression, state-sponsored oppression, unlike democracy. Because democracy allows for divergent opinion. But Russia, North Korea, all these other countries that the Americans had once called the axis of evil, do not allow opinion. They don't allow press freedom. They don't allow any form of dissent. Look at Russia. All opposition.
All right, welcome back. And of course, we deeply apologize for the break in transmission. Let's now take a look at more interventions and bilateral relations between the president of Nigeria and that of the South Africa. Recall yesterday was the swearing-in ceremony of Cyril Ramaphosa, and the president today, earlier, met with the South African president for diplomatic and economic and bilateral talks following a successful presidential inauguration ceremony. In a statement, the president revealed that their discussion focused on enhancing cooperation and strengthening economic ties between Nigeria and South Africa. He added that they resolved to address their country's challenges through the robust trade and economic strategies. And a lot of concern to this, the legal practitioner, trace back the relations between Nigeria and South Africa. For you, is this a way of consolidating on these relations and also seeing how Nigeria can take advantage with South Africa and how South Africa can also take advantage with Nigeria, looking at the scenario of economic differences in both countries?
Yeah, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu visited South Africa to attend the inauguration ceremony of the second term of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Just like South African leaders also attended the inauguration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So it's fine. But I also like you to understand that these are two African leaders. Nigeria and South Africa are being touted as the leaders in the continent. And so a strategic partnership, economic ties, political ties, bilateral relations need to be strengthened. Not necessarily for anything but to bolster their trade and also fortify the continent. Don't forget, there have been a few distractions with South Africa, leading the alliance for BRICS on behalf of Russia, South Africa suing the Israeli government and the United Nations over the mayhem in Gaza and the rest. But that notwithstanding, Nigeria too has also had its own rough sides with South Africa. We won't forget in a hurry the xenophobic attacks by South Africans against Nigerians and their interests in the country. But on a larger scale, Nigeria South Africa are brothers. Unfortunately, we still have a visa, they still have visa deadlock. You can't visit South Africa without a visa, and South Africans can come here without a visa. But beyond that, a lot of trade. ShopRite is owned by a South African company. DSTV is South African. MultiChoice is South African. There are a whole lot. Don't forget to some time back in the last administration, due to infractions by MTN is South African. They paid heavy fines for gray areas and misconduct in their modus operandi. So, but generally, the volume of trade between both countries has appreciated over time, and it is important that relations be strengthened. But I don't see there's not much. The strengthening in diplomacy, you also have what we call verbal diplomacy and core diplomacy. So I think it's just for the cameras for now.
Because when you look at deep down, Nigeria's Giant of Africa status have over times, I don't know what you may be able to rate that scenarios of how Nigeria's Giant of Africa can be right now. But look at the fact that in the committees of nations, African nations, the Nigerians are meant to stand tall, looking at the capacity, looking at the population, looking at resources, looking at what we have been blessed with. To you, the indices of the fact that South Africa is probably quite developing right now than Nigeria's economy. What may be the message for the leaders of the country to also see how they can learn and do better? Because away from the fact that we've also blamed that the Western intervention hasn't really helped us so far, but to what end can we begin to help ourselves within the region and foster cooperation that can really get to reflect on the economy?
Well, you cannot put Nigeria and South Africa on the same scale. If you look at the resources that God has blessed this country with, Nigeria is far richer, far blessed with natural human resources. But you see, the problem of Nigeria has always been leadership, poverty of leadership, and quality of leadership. Maybe we are beginning to get it right. We hope so. But South Africa, too, has also had a lot of their rough sides. The difference in development has always been that whereas South Africans are serious and sincere in committing their resources to develop their nations. In Nigeria, we have been playing a lot with corruption, and a lot of farmer leaders have looted the commonwealth of the people. So that's why it looks like we are stunted back in development. But this pariah drag for the Giant of Africa has always been a rat race, chasing shadows, because indeed where one cannot even at this point say who actually is a giant of Africa. That is, if Africa is still a giant. There are a lot of improvements that need to be done in the foreign diplomacy of each nation's development, especially human capital development, infrastructure, and trade. So I see Nigeria's strengthening of ties with South Africa a good step in the right direction, but to what extent? Nigerian businesses in South Africa, are they flourishing as South African businesses in Nigeria? These are areas we need to look at. How many of Nigeria's businesses are doing well, like the South Africans are having here, the business climate, the ease to do business, and other indices of business development. These are the areas we need to look at. But strengthening these relations will, of course, bolster greater economic ties between both nations and position these two countries to help other African nations, as it were.
All right, let's look at the electoral process. There have been the fact that the outcome of the elections result really showed example of what transparency may look like, because from the Situation Room we were able to analyze from this other path. We saw how it was demonstrated. We saw how a lot of placement was different from what we've seen in INEC's election. To you, because one of the issues we may continue to have as a nation and as a region is the fact that elections are not probably transparent, and the moment where we lack confidence in the election umpires and those who are conducting the elections and the result of the elections and how we are producing our leaders, then we are not still getting it right, because it ought to be the fact that people have to know the transparency at this level. If we are really practicing democracy, it means that it should be of the people, and what does it really reflect on the people is what probably they have commended South Africa's elections umpire compared to what INEC did in 2023. To you, is there any lesson we can begin to pick from that exercise by South Africa?
Well, transparency and accountability by electoral bodies is a prerequisite for a stable democracy. However, I'd like to disagree with those who say no black nation has actually had a perfect electoral system or process. Blacks by themselves are fond of manipulating. That is not to say that the whites don't manipulate. We also have civilized nations who have manipulated elections and issues with the electoral system and processes. However, I commend South Africa for having a near-perfect process. It's not 100% foolproof, but it was a bit organized. I think the difference between what you see there and in Nigeria is the level of criticism. You do have a lot of citizens criticizing the electoral processes. You had citizens bearing understanding and patriotism. There's improved patriotism among the citizens. So, but Nigeria has a lot to learn from that. Beyond the fact that it is South Africa, the electoral umpire in Nigeria need to make the process more transparent, more stable, more foolproof, and devoid of interference from the elites, from political elites, from politicians, from incumbent powers, as it were.
How can you begin to compare the different political parties in South Africa? Because you also understand, oftentimes, the issues we face has always been political parties. We've seen how political parties have ridiculed the court. I mean, every time we see how they run to court, even after party primaries, at the end of the day, does not really get it right. To you, because concern has always been the fact that if we must get it right in election, and even INEC are arguing that the many issues that are facing is because the political parties are dragging them backward, because the moment where primaries are being conducted, we've seen parallel primaries conducting for the same offices in election. We've seen how they have distracted INEC. We've seen how the candidates have gone to polling unit to start buying vote, and all of these issues will be fine. To you, what has been the difference of political parties' emergence in all of these climes that are working compared to what we're facing in the country, and how can we begin to see how we can work better in developing political systems that can really translate to getting democracy right in the country?
Well, that's a good question. First and foremost, let's start with Nigeria. You know, even the INEC knows that the parties are about the people. People form parties. Membership of political parties are people. But beyond that too, Nigerians have a lot to learn from unnecessary intrigues, skimmings, and this, what I call razzmatazz with selection of candidates for elections. And that has also affected the democratic experience that we have. Unlike South Africa, the African National Congress has stayed in power for more than 24 years. Is because the founders of ANC had already provided a foolproof system of the party checking even its leaders. Don't forget how Thabo Mbeki left power. Don't forget how Jacob Zuma came to power. And even Cyril Ramaphosa. It has been the self-evolving activities of ANC by themselves. Once a leader is sent out, if he doesn't perform, the party checks him first. That hardly happens in Nigeria because the president is the leader of the party, answerable to only himself. So the scenarios differ. So whereas in South Africa, you have a party that can actually stand up against its elected president, and leaders of that party take power from him. Unlike in Nigeria, that it is even the party that must protect the president if they must remain relevant. So there's a lot to learn, but like I said, South Africa shouldn't be our role model because they also have their issues. In fact, the infighting in the African National Congress, we thought would have turned that country into two and allowed the opposition win. But despite their fracas, they still stood still to their ideals. And that is the beauty of democracy. In Nigeria too, remember, in the last elections, a lot of people said the president will not be APC, the All Progressive Congress, will go extinct. But we didn't see that. Rather, we saw more robust engagement in the APC, despite the fact that some Nigerians don't like the party. What about PDP? After 16 years in power, they can't return. They've been making efforts like scratching the ground, fall back, scratch the ground, fall back. And so a beautiful opportunity would have been for a third party, an underdog, to have emerged, and then displace these two. But they didn't succeed at the initial time. I hope they succeed some other time. We had Labour Party in Nigeria. Apart from the politics that had to do with the candidates of that party, that was an underdog that gave the other parties a run for their money. And that tells you too that it's about the people. That the processes of elections, the electioneering campaigns, the electioneering process, and even leadership and governance, as it were, is about the people. It should be about what the people want.
Well, it might be the fact that we may not use South Africa as a model for elections, but we may begin to also pay attention to the fact that we must do better as a country so that we can actually get to the democracy of our dream. But let's take a look at what is actually happening at Kaduna State, where there have been release of the fact that Amajiri children on the state will be given qualitative educational opportunities through the government said about 25,000 school pupils spread across the 23 local government councils of the state have already benefited from the school feeding program, which cost the government 4 billion naira. The assurance was from the special assistant to the governor, Sani Uba, in a statement he made to the press. According to the statement, he said some of the Islamic and underprivileged school pupils, as part of the Eid Kabir Salah celebration, was to held at their primary schools in Maridans, Council of Kaduna State, and that government decided to vet the pupils in Western education as part of an ongoing effort to ensure that children of the less privileged have access to quality education in the state. She said that the school feeding program, which so far cost the state government over 4 billion naira, has boosted school enrollment and retention, as well as stimulated the local economy in the state. But a concern to be the fact that over 4 billion naira going into for feeding, and some person may ask the sustainability of this exercise. We've seen federal government trying to borrow levy, in the national, in different primary schools. A lot of contractors were awarded that contract. At the end of the day, the impact wasn't felt. To you, what more can be done to get pupils back to classroom away from voting for over 4 billion now of the state treasury just for school feeding? That at the end of the day, we do not even know. We cannot even have government cannot even begin to make account for such exorbitant expenses.
Well, I wonder what impact school feeding. What kind of impact you expected school feeding to bring? When children eat, they go to toilet, they grow with it. So the impact is in them. No child has died.
Because they're trying to get them to classroom.
No, but I think it's a good thing by the Kaduna State government, and I'll tell you why. You see, the core focus there is access to education. During the government of President Goodluck Jonathan, he built a lot of Amajiri schools, which were abandoned during the Muhammadu Buhari era. If those Amajiri schools were given the attention that they ought to have been given, we wouldn't have any Amajiri child on the street. What the Kaduna State governor is trying to do is to solve the Amajiri school children problem by giving them access to education. And that is the right thing. And then feeding them while they are there is also the right thing. The Amajiri children on the streets are begging for food. Is it not better that they are in school, receiving learning, receiving education, and also eating? I think it's a good thing. Many northern state governments should borrow a leaf from the Kaduna State government. However, that is not the whole solution. State governments, especially in the north, considering the topography and the problems of the north, need to give more and more children access to quality education. Because this is also one way of checkmating the influence of banditry and the influence of extremism in the north. So Kaduna State for me is leading by example. It doesn't matter how much they have invested in the school feeding program. The core purpose and focus is the access to education for those children. So because when they have access to education, they'll think differently.
It's a what investment?
Yes, it's commendable, highly commendable. But you know, in Nigeria, we see where governments appear to be chasing what is right. At the end of the day, it will be a conduit pipe for corruption. But beyond, of course, but beyond that, I commend the Kaduna State.
The program itself might be genuine.
Yes.
But the process of how this is delivered to the grassroots.
It's not spirits who come and take those jobs and contracts. They're still Nigerians. But it's commendable. And I want the government to establish a back-end process of checking the success rate of this program. It's commendable. All northern states should adopt and follow through with what Kaduna State government is doing.
All right, so right now, let's go on a quick break, and once we return, we'll be taking a look at politics at Rivers State. As it seems, the governor itself, Fubara, has given instruction to the caretaker committee to operate remotely if they make an attempt to gain access to the council might not be possible to them. So that will be what we'll be looking at shortly after this break. Do stay with us on the program, The Dax.
It's time for sports' biggest moments on global television. The headlines, scores, breaking news, and commentaries on sporty events. Talking with the biggest players, strikers, and about the slam dunks and goals, stunning saves, near misses, and upsets. Let's talk about the greatest home runs, comebacks, knockdowns, and victories. Talk sports with the king of sports, Anthony Momodu. Weekdays, 10 a.m. Don't miss out.
Beautiful work from the wingers.
Are you ready to be entertained like never before? Get ready to dive into the latest and greatest entertainment news in lifestyle, music, movies, birthday celebration, and so much more. All on Entertainment Circle on Global Television. From the hottest red carpet event to exclusive interviews with your favorite stars, we've got you covered. Stay up to date with the latest trends and news from the entertainment world, all in one place. Tune in every Saturday by 1 p.m. with Chong Animal Joseph on Global Television.
Time check. It's midday. Then it's Midday Discourse. Midday Discourse is a program that covers trending local and international news, current issues, and human-related topics. Join Samuel Odi weekdays 1 p.m. on Global Television. The discussion starts here.
For an insightful idea that takes the center stage and the conversation that gets beyond the headlines, to explore the lasting impact of political decisions, Big Talk got you covered. From policy debates to geopolitical insights, from thought-provoking discussions to actionable insight.
What is the real responsibility of government?
Big Talk delves deep into the heart of the matter. Join us weekdays on Global Televisions from 6:30 p.m. for a reverting journey into the heart of politics, where we dissect issues shaping our society.
Is that
Many thanks for staying with us on the program. Let's now get to Rivers State politics. It seems a lot of uproar is still ongoing as the newly sworn-in caretaker committee hasn't been allowed to have access to the council. We've seen videos circulating on the social media where the police had to quote that the instruction is given from the federal government, not for anyone to have access to the council. And the governor is stating that the council chairman can actually operate remotely. We've not gotten to see that happening in the country. But right there in Rivers State, the local government chairman and the committee members are allowed to work remotely from their home, from wherever they can be able to work from. This is also the concern of the fact that the uproar is coming on the heels of the fact that those whose tenures are expired are also quoting the law that they are still in charge, they are still to be in the office and all of that. Recall that some security personnel have lost their life in the process of getting these negotiated and the settlement. But to what end might this actually get a look like politically in Rivers State? Let's look at the fact that over time, Rivers always on the news, and anytime it's coming on the news, it's not from the development. Prior to this time, we've used to see Rivers always coming in commissioning of projects and all of those deliverables of former Governor Wike. But right now, the picture is quite sad one, from House of Assembly now to local government council. To you understand the part of the laws and the interpretation of this. What is the way forward for Rivers State?
Well, what is happening in Rivers is very interesting, but let me begin on a note by stating that the governor of Rivers State should be allowed to do his job. The people of Rivers State should be allowed to choose who they want as their leaders. This unnecessary interference and bickering from whatever camp, including that of the former governor, is unwarranted, unnecessary, and it will only lead to shame and more destruction of property and their interest. What is the fight for? The Constitution of Nigeria provides that Section 7 provides that local government systems will be administered by state legislatures. So it is the State House of Assembly that enacts laws to run the local governments. Now, across even the South, many state governments have also, appointed caretaker committees, like in Akwa Ibom. The House of Assembly extended the tenure of even the caretaker committees by another 6 months. So it's not new. Now, the problem is with the legality of the existence of the 27 pro-Wike legislators who defected to the APC. And going by the Supreme Court decision, once you decamp or defect from your party and it is not warranted or there was no crisis, you automatically lose your seat. However, it lies in the mouth of the court to pronounce so. So, a court has actually pronounced that the 27 lawmakers who defected had lost their seats. So, that amendment they made is not valid in the eyes of the law anymore. And I believe it is on that strength that the governor of Rivers State has, followed through with the decisions of the new House of Assembly. But the problem also arises of quorum. But I like to say here that the judiciary needs to come in to stem this madness by politicians, because this appears to be taking democracy in that state too far. But it's laughable. The local government chairman who claim that they are still in power, how will they get money? How will they spend the money? What platform will they be using? They are saying the law. Which law? It is the same law that allows the executive arm of government to fund them. So I believe that what is happening in Rivers State is actually a fight between good and bad for the ultimate good of the people. Because you see the government, the governor, and the government of the state working for the remote interest of the people. They should be allowed. This interference from wherever. Well, and then I need to correct an impression. I don't believe the police is taking sides. The police, Nigeria police, taking over the secretariats of those councils is to prevent breach of public peace and order. And moreover, the police is only carrying out the orders of the court of appeal that instructed, because they've received court order, instructed that parties should maintain status quo until a ruling has been given. I think that is the position. So whether the caretaker committees operate remotely or spiritually, they have been sworn in their caretaker committees and they remain valid. They will receive funding from the government. So even if they are at home and run the local governments from home, it doesn't matter. What is important is that let the courts give their ruling and judgment and let us know where these people stand. Now, I doubt that the court, because I know it will get to the Supreme Court, I doubt that the court will allow the 27 pro-Wike lawmakers to stay. I seriously doubt, going by the judicial precedent and case law. This is because they are dancing naked. It appears they are dancing as ghosts. So they are buying time to cause confusion and make the state ungovernable. But you see, it also is still foolish because the governor is still appropriating and spending. Contracts and projects are still ongoing. So who loses? And this has to stop. Nigerians are tired of these shenanigans. I'm not sure Nyesom Wike as governor of Rivers State would have tolerated or condoned 1/100 of what his people or whatever he's meting out to the present governor. The present governor is a cool gentleman. Yes, he's fireman setting his bed. He's a cool gentleman. Now you say I brought him. Yeah. So for purposes of not dabbling into the internal politics, the governor and the government of Rivers State should be allowed to do their job.
Let me ask this. What does the law says about declaring state of emergency? Because we've seen APC held a press conference yesterday calling on the president to declare state of emergency in Rivers State.
The president will not declare state of emergency in Rivers because the president is not mad. The president of Nigeria knows that before you declare a state of emergency in a state, there are conditions that must have taken place before you declare state. There must be a total breakdown of public peace and law and order. And that has not happened in Rivers State. So secondly, don't forget that Rivers State is a very volatile area. No government will dabble or take the risk of making that region hostile. The resources of this, in fact, the wealth of this nation comes from there. Why would you declare your pot of soup in the state of emergency in your kitchen? That means you stay hungry for a long time. And if anything happens there and the burns down, the whole house will go down. But like I said, it's not beyond what the judiciary will do. These matters are before the courts, and I'm sure that the judicial arm of government, which has been the hope of the common man, will come in and save the day. But I'm speaking from my point of view that the pro-Wike camp will lose in the end because they are some interlopers. And this has also exposed the hypocrisy and selfishness of the political class in Rivers State because all along it has been about them, not about the people. Now, for once, you can also see that the same people who voted this chairman also went back to the councils to say you will not stay there longer. So that's the beauty of democracy. I listened to the leader of the Joy Youth Congress the other day at the Port Harcourt City Council saying, look, we voted these people too. We say, no, don't stay there. On whose behalf are you staying a day longer? Are you not supposed to be there for 100? We say, no, go. You're not the only ones. We can't see what you're doing. And that's the beauty of democracy. Must they stay? Must their tenure be extended?
It seems they got an order from, probably someone told them somewhere from Abuja, and not for them to...
You see, there's another part of it. I listened
to... a clear rascality.
No, I saw during Ngelale, the senior special assistant to the president of media, clearly state that Mr. President will not take sides in the issue in Rivers State. And it's correct. I'm very sure Mr. President doesn't even have time to do that. Now, is Wike's problem, Minister of FCC, is his problem to solve if his hand is in it. But like I said, the state government will ultimately have their way. They look at the Kano. We had the same opera. The government have their way. The Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sonasi, conducted the Doba under state protection. So what are we saying? Forgot that the post Emir had given a notice that it will host the Doba. They did host the Doba. No! So it's about the state and the state machinery. And you see, it is these issues that have made state governors keep advocating for state police. Because I know that...
afraid.
Yes, because this will also mean that the state governors will monopolize the state police and use them to settle scores. So, but beyond that, the police is doing their job. I'm not sure they've acted out of order. There is a lot of constitutionality in the issues in Rivers State. And all parties understand this. So it's just flexing of muscles. But like I said, the governor and his team will have their way because they are on the side of the law.
A big issue right there in Rivers State, but we'll get to see the end of these issues as it gets to unfold itself every day. And for the fact that the both parties will understand that there is a need for peace because the development of Rivers State is also important due to the fact that analysis and records of what the contributions of Rivers State to the nation might be. So it is right to state that the peace might be the way forward for the Minister of FCT and the governor and every person and stakeholders of Rivers State must come together to see how they can actually advocate for peace right there, for stability and cause of of governance to proceed. But let's now round about the program with the issues of minimum wage. It seems the governors are silenced. We do not know the position of the governors. At the last briefing they had, they told federal government, they told Labour that we can't even pay 62,000 naira. And now that there is a procedures already to transmit it to the National Assembly, what may likely be the outcome of the implementation? Because away from the federal government, given the implementation of the 62,000 proposed minimum wage, is about for the state government to also cooperate to pay to you. Does it really show the fact that governors may not likely want to go the part of the federal government for this 62,000 naira? Because when you look at it, it looks something that is realistic for both the state and the federal government.
Well, on the issue of minimum wage, it is not true that all the state governors are saying they will not pay. That is very incorrect. There are many states in this country that can even pay 200,000 naira minimum wage to their workers. An example of that state is Lagos. An example is Rivers. An example is Akwa Ibom.
So it should be exception of
yeah, what I expect the NLC and the state governments to do is to enter into tripartite engagements. States that can pay what they can pay, state it, and they grow from there. States that cannot pay, start paying from where they are. Now, I'm not talking about states like Edo State, because the pronouncement of the Edo State governor that it is even willing to pay 70,000 is for politics, because elections are around the corner. Why didn't you start paying 70,000?
But it started 30,000 from records.
Well, when you say records, still for politics, how many civil servants are in Edo State? What is the impact of the workforce in Edo State? It's just a microcosm. Now, however, of the larger society, the Labour and the state government, because the state governments too also are part of the problems of workers in this country. Reduce your workforce if it is overbloated and pay what you can afford. In fact, you can make the civil service lean and efficient. In civilized climes, that is how it is done. You can reduce the workforce and then pay. It will also, unfortunately, because of the present economic situation, it will also increase the unemployment gap. But then, I am also aware that many civil servants are not even working. You go to some state secretariats, you see many workers go to work lackadaisically. So why are we deceiving ourselves? And the burden of the payment of salaries and minimum wage is a big burden of many state governments. But then, some other state governments are also engaged in profligacy and embezzlement and unnecessary wastage of state resources. So instead of wasting that money, why not use it to pay minimum wage? Reduce your workforce. You can have a lean workforce that is efficient, and then you can use these resources to do other developmental projects. So it is impossible for all state governments to agree with the federal government to pay whatever the federal government will pay, because the size of their incomes differ. And their responsibilities and items to cater differ too. But we also have some state governments who have been very extravagant. We have also prudent state governments. But a state like Lagos shouldn't even be mentioned that it cannot pay minimum wage. A state like Rivers, Akwa Ibom. We have other states that don't receive 13% derivation who are struggling. And then maybe some states in the north can say, okay, let's start from where we are. So it's very important. I doubt if there will be a uniform rate. It's not possible. Because it will send some states into bankruptcy.
But the act, if we review it, would definitely means that it has to be implemented.
No, it will not be. It will not be. I doubt if it will be uniform. That will be the failure of the minimum wage the fight. What I think it will simmer down to is, after the federal government and Labour have settled for what federal workers will receive, then it will be a battle at the states. And likely the state governments will win, because even the Labour organs of the state governments dance to the whims and caprices of each state governor. And we live in a money economy where people who shout, let them die. The first person who gets money goes home. So what are we saying? What we should be looking at is the productivity of the average Nigerian worker vis-a-vis what the states pay. Every state, every civil servant in the country needs to receive a living wage. But that will also determine where you are. Which state are you working? Even in the United States, each state government determines what the workers in their state receive. It's not the same. Workers in California, they don't receive the same thing as workers in Chicago or New York. They're all different. So that's where I see it going. You can never have all state governors pay the same. You can expect the Rivers state government to pay the same amount of minimum wage that Gombe will pay. No, Gombe will go into extinction. Except their governments are prudent with their resources, invest a lot of their monies, and have returns that will take them through. And this still calls back the issue of transparency and accountability in governance. We have, like Niger State has gone into farming and agriculture. In a little while, that state can raise a lot of revenue to pay its civil servants. So without even necessarily waiting cap in hand to receive all what the federal government gives in the joint federal government state allocation. So what I expect to see NLC do is to stop playing politics and enter into tripartite negotiations with state governments to see what each state government can pay, what it can offer, and arrive at that.
A lot of issues right there, but I mean, when we look at the fact that it's an unending conversation, because even the act itself is subject to review after 5 years, so it reflects to the state of the economy and to what government can also be able to offer. But what Nigerians are really looking at is also the fact that both the private sectors are also considering these move for minimum wage, because it may also have a ripple effect in the private sector as well. But to what government can offer should be something substantial and sustainable enough to the Nigerian workers, so as not to treat them as missed priorities in the country's development. That's where we are wrapping it up right now on the program, The Decks, and of course bringing to you more highlights of these headlines and political shows and conversations around the topic. Comes again tomorrow on the program. My name is Edikan Mike, and thanks to Kanimo Abasi, a legal practitioner, who joins us live here on the program to discuss these. For now, we'll say goodbye to see you again tomorrow on the program, same time here on Global Television.